What is up, YouTube? Doug Polk here, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be taking a spin and go played by fellow Team Grind Nation member Courtney Gee, and we're going to be breaking down every hand to talk about the strategies that she should be using. If you want to see how to play spin and goes, and maybe more specifically micro stake spin and goes, this is a great video to learn from, and also to get to meet a member of Team Grind Nation, Courtney. Courtney's doing a bankroll challenge over on her YouTube that's similar to what I was doing on Twitch last month, but she's doing it with spin and goes and only on YouTube. We also have part 1 of the video over there, so if you like this video and you want to learn more about the format, head over to her channel and check it out. Let's go ahead and hop into the spin and go that we reviewed together. We are here with Courtney Gee for part 2 of our spin and go series, fellow member of Grind Nation. What's up, Courtney?
Hey guys! Hey Doug, so nice to be here. I'm super excited to learn more awesome things from you in the spin and go.
The spin and go format sure is riveting.
Yes, indeed, especially at the 25-cent stake.
Exactly. All right, let's hop on in then.
All right. I don't even remember what we spun here, so it's a surprise. Oh,
I love
50
how they just always throw the big amounts in there just to just be like, oh, it could be 3,000.
You gotta know what you're missing, so you keep playing, right?
Exactly. All right, so actually let's talk about this fold really quick here.
Okay.
So what's your strategy on the button here at 25 big blinds deep? Like, what hands are you planning on opening? Like, I guess let me ask you, what's your worst hand you're planning on opening here?
My worst hand that I'm planning on opening. So let's see if we just go, it was 9-3 suited, right?
Right.
So suited 9s, I would probably open 9-5 suited.
Okay. I mean, that's fairly reasonable. And
Okay.
and one of the things, I guess, in these shorter stack games, relative to when you're playing a bit deeper, I guess, is you want to make sure you're a little bit more on the tight side because you're going to get jammed on a lot.
Right.
And particularly when you're playing without an ante, I think that this fold is okay. That said, particularly at the low stakes, and particularly for 25 blinds, like right out of the gate, right? I think you're going to find that you're going to have plenty of fold equity, and frankly, trying to play against whoever's in the big blind with a hand that's just simply suited is likely going to be profitable. So I think I would try and maybe have a few more opens on the button, particularly when you're playing in some of these low stakes games.
Okay. So you would have raised the 9-3 suited?
Yeah, I think I would. I think if I'm playing versus players, like let's say we were playing a really high stakes spin and go, which to my knowledge doesn't exist yet, but let's just say we were doing that, then I might want to be a little more careful when raising some of the weak hands like that, where I am going to get 3-bet a lot and my opponents are going to play back against me a decent amount. But particularly in softer games, I think having a wider button open strategy is generally better because post-flop, they're probably going to be making some mistakes, and then also players in the big blind aren't really going to know how wide they need to defend. So I guess I'm just trying to give some good advice to people that are playing maybe the really low stakes spin and goes.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. Sounds good. Well, now this entire spin and go, I'm going to be like, man, I'm opening just too tight. The rest of the spin and go is being like, oh yeah, I should have raised this. Oops. Well.
But I mean, that's a good thing probably to learn here, in this video, I guess overall, is just when you are playing these smaller stakes, capitalize on people's nittiness and really, try and get some more bluffs in, try and take down some more pots will definitely help your win rate.
Right. That makes sense.
So let's actually pause this for a second here and talk about pre-flop. When you raise this up facing a limp, what's your plan if they limp jam?
My plan if they limp jam is to, well, usually my strategy here is I'm going to try to raise hands that I'm okay with calling with
Right.
when they jam. I'm not planning on calling 100% of my raises, so the King Jack is probably one that I could find a fold with. If I had some, I don't think I would raise King 10 here because I don't want to have too many King X that I'm going to be raised folding, but I don't know if that strategy makes sense.
Sure. So to talk about the way that I think I would try to play this, you're going to want to have, I guess, you're going to want to have a polarization here pre-flop. And this actually reminds me of the first video that we did. We talked a bit about raising some weak hands in the big blind, right? Where you might want to raise with some hands like 4-3 suited or 5-2 suited, or maybe even some hands like 4-3 off against a small blind limp, as a bluff, right? And when I'm bluffing with those hands, I do try to be a little bit more careful and selective with raising value bets that are going to have to fold the jams. Now, That doesn't mean that you can't raise this. You know, you're going to risk 40 chips here when you raise to 60 to win 40 chips. So you're getting pretty good odds on this raise. And it's definitely okay to have some value hands to raise versus limp to fold to jam. But at the same time, I think that King Jack is pretty close either way.
Right.
I like the idea of checking King 10. And I guess I would just say to be careful with raising hands that are going to have a very difficult time when facing re-raises.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Totally agree with you. Keep going.
Yep, sounds good. All right, we take it down. I think both betting and checking on the flop, by the way, can be pretty reasonable options.
Okay. Sounds good. A5 offsuit, probably not good enough to complete there. 8-7 offsuit I would be completing. I'm not sure about 8-6.
Yeah, so you probably need about 17% to call. You're going to get raised by the big blind, you know, somewhere between 10, 20%. So you really have to have more like 20 to 24% equity to complete there.
Okay.
Out of position three-way, you know, it's probably pretty close. I think you can make kind of a case either way.
Okay. Sounds good. At least I'm not too far off here in these,
No,
in
you're
these
right in the
discussions
ballpark.
so far.
Right in the ballpark. And yeah, those ace X hands, like ace 4 you just raised on the button, those are definitely good hands to steal with, planning on folding to a jam. Actually, let's
Right.
pause right here. I think this is interesting, and I just want to talk about the ace 4 really quick.
Yeah, sure.
But those hands make really nice steals because when you get jammed on, particularly this deep, you're going to be fine letting it go, even though you do have an ace. And what's going to happen is because you have an ace, both players are much more likely to be weak. So those hands are really nice. You know, it's weird to call it a steal when it's the best hand, but it kind of is when you deny your opponents their equity.
Okay, makes sense.
With this hand here, so what are your thoughts here pre-flop? Because I actually think this is a very interesting situation, and there's a lot of answers. There's a lot of things you could decide to do here.
Yeah, so probably my calling ranges in the small blind aren't the greatest. I don't always know what to do. Jack 9 suited I feel like is good enough to flat here because I feel like it does relatively well in the multi-way pot because I assume that the big blind's going to call a lot here. But I don't think I would fold with Jack 8 suited. And yeah, I guess those are my preliminary thoughts.
Okay, well, there is a third option.
There's a third option of
There always is.
raising, or so raise, fold, call, right? Those are my only options.
You know what's actually very funny about this hand? Because it was a little bit of a trick question for me because really everything is reasonable here.
Okay.
If you're playing against a particularly tight button open, you could fold. Although I think folding is probably the least reasonable option.
Right.
You know, your hand has a lot of equity, and I think I would like to try and put in some other kind of range. I don't mind the idea of calling. The slight problem I do have with that is as players get shorter, they tend to be more likely to jam, right?
Yes.
And on 21 or 21 and a half blinds that the big blind has here, that might not be as big of a factor, which makes flatting a little bit better. But I always want to be careful with some of these speculative flats where I'm going to have to fold a lot because whenever he re-raises behind, you have to fold. So that's one thing to take into account when looking at flat. But another thing to think about when we're looking at re-raising is, you know, what size are you going to want to make it here when you have a hand like aces or kings?
Okay.
Like, you're going to want to go small, right?
Well,
You're going to want to make this like 110 chips or something.
well, I think standard for me here would be about 100.
Okay, cool. So you're going to go 100. And what hands are you planning on balancing that out with as bluffs?
Well, do I have any balanced bluff? Do I bluff here in the small blind at this stake? I probably don't do that very often, but that is something I
Why?
should think about for sure. Yeah, well, I'll be completely honest that raising here in this spot with a Jack 9 suited did not cross my mind. So you're kind of like blowing my mind.
All right, well, I guess what I'd say here is this. When you're going to have a small re-raise range with your best hands, which is definitely best for them, right? If you have aces, you don't want to jam, right?
Right.
So you want to pick some hands out that are close between fold and call that can operate as good bluffs. Because then, you know, like let's just say you make it 100 chips here, right? You're probably not going to get too many folds. You might get no folds, you might get a few folds, that's fine. But he's mainly going to call. And that means that when he calls, you're going to get to try to realize your equity. You get a chance to put a profitable bluff out there on the flop, and maybe you have a chance to bet the flop and jam the turn with some kind of draw. And what that's going to do is that's going to balance out your aces, kings, and queens with all of those draws to make your overall strategy win more chips.
Okay.
So I think I like this hand as either a call or a small 3-bet. I think
Okay.
folding is probably a little bit too conservative.
All right. That sounds really good. That's awesome. Now I'll be thinking about that and 3-betting so many of these types of hands in the small blind now.
There's always the third option.
Um,
So this flop is actually like a little. It's kind of interesting to me because, oh man, this spot's actually really tough. But anyway, like this spot's interesting because both players, particularly the small blind, are not going to have many ace X hands. A lot of those are going to be jamming pre-flop or re-raising small pre-flop.
right.
So the big blind can have a few weak aces that they call with pre-flop, but on this board, it's actually a pretty bad board for the small blind.
Okay.
And facing the 20 chip bet, I don't mind any option here. I guess you really can't raise because you don't have value hands that you'd want to raise, right? So, maybe you have ace 8 suited or ace 6 suited. But you really don't have many strong hands that you'd want to raise here. If you have a hand like 6s or 8s, you're definitely jamming pre-flop.
Right.
So I don't think raising is actually good. So the question is, do you want to have some light floats against such a small bet? And I think I'm okay with either fold or call here.
Okay. We went fold.
Okay, I think that's totally fine. I mean, you don't know what the big blind has. The button has a bunch of aces. But keep in mind, like, when you're getting, what was that, 7-1?
Right.
Should probably be pretty likely to float the flop.
In this spot right here, I actually, to be completely honest, I had no idea whether I had called or whether I'd folded because I was sitting here going, I don't know which one I did because, like you said, such a small bet.
So let's press pause here on the flop.
Yes.
Or on the turn, that's fine. So let's just say that he does this lead. What hands are you planning on raising with as a bluff?
In this spot, let me see. So perhaps something like something that maybe has some equity, an overcard. So maybe a type of straight draw.
Give me some hand examples. Let's pick some hands out.
Okay,
what would be
how
a good
about? And I'm trying to think of things that have so maybe something like Queen 7 with the Queen of Hearts.
Sure, I think either gut shots, backdoor flush draws, or even a hand like that.
Right.
That's pretty loose though, Courtney. That's getting a little on the loose side there.
No, I never said I'd do that. I just said, in theory, if we were to pick a hand, which was the question.
I see. So, but I actually think that's a pretty reasonable strategy.
Okay.
I think you want to raise some bluffs here that are hands that are not awkward when you get jammed on. So let me give you some examples of some bad raises.
Right.
You would not want to raise a hand like 7-6.
Right.
Where if you get jammed on, you're forced to fold out a bunch of equity. You want to raise hands that are like maybe a hand like 6-4 suited, or a hand like, Queen. I think maybe a hand like Queen 9 or something, more of a gut shot type hand is fine too.
Okay.
Or maybe you want to call that and decide to raise with a hand like Queen 7 because Queen 9 is too good against a min bet, which, that's also a very reasonable strategy. But you just want to make sure that you're keeping your raise ranges polarized, which is, always what you want to be trying to do. You always want to be trying to separate your raise range into bluffs and value bets, and then try and have as many hands in the middle that are calling as you possibly can.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. So, I actually, I think in this hand in this spot, I wasn't actually sure what to do. So he's continuing with his tiny little bet here on an ace turn, which seemed very strange to me. And then I wanted to raise again, but then his stack is such a strange size, so I was very stumped here on this turn.
So let's start off with this. How often do you think he has an ace?
I think he has an ace, not very often.
Right, and I think there's a few reasons that we can deduce that. The first is pre-flop call on the stack will not have many ace X in it, because a lot of those hands are going to re-raise pre-flop. If he has a hand like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, I think almost all of those hands are going with the pre-flop.
Yeah.
And in the small blind facing an open, I generally think hands like ace, the weakest aces, are going to be folding. And then after that, he leads the flop for a min bet and calls a raise. It's sort of hard for him to really have an ace. I mean, if he has an ace, he has a hand that's like ace 5 suited, maybe ace 8, maybe ace jack, but honestly, I don't even think that he would have that from pre-flop. And then maybe a hand like ace 9 of hearts. But I think he's way more likely to have hands like king jack, queen jack, jack 9 suited, jack 8 suited, 10-9 suited, 6-7 suited, 9-8 suited. All of these hands are way more likely to play it pre-flop. Like, think back to our jack 9 in the small blind, right? Same situation when he called the open.
Right.
So he's way more likely to have all of those hands. And, you know, I know the stack seems awkward, but there's 260 in the pot and 260 behind. So he basically just has pot behind.
Yes.
So I think on the turn here, I'm jamming, and this will allow me to jam with some hands that are like some of those gut shot or flush draws that are backdoor flush draws. Maybe those are the hands I give up. But this, I'm going to jam here with queens, and this also allows me an opportunity to jam when I have some of those weak draws to try and get him to fold maybe a stronger draw, an 8, or put him in a really tough spot with a jack.
Okay, that makes sense. Oh, Courtney, what's going to happen? Oh my goodness. Do the right thing.
I think it looks like
baby.
Nice.
That's nice. Every so often we do something that's correct.
You did great there. You sounded like you didn't raise.
Oh no, I was pretty sure that I did, but I played these hands a pretty long time ago, so you can't always be sure that past Courtney was a smart person.
I gotcha. All right, so we call this bet. Seems fine. Pretty bad turn.
That's the worst.
All right, so
turn.
yeah, I
What
think
are we
raising
gonna
definitely
do?
standard here.
I think I wasn't sure about sizing here. I made it 70.
That seems okay. I might go a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, when I raise in spots, I try to hit a home run.
Okay.
And that way, when I'm bluffing, I have the most ability to bluff. You know, because
Okay.
when you go bigger sizes, you get to bluff more. So when you are gonna raise a bet, especially in a spin and go, I would try to size it in a way where you're going to be able to go all in by the river.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
And small blind, I think both limp and jam are fine. If you wanted to put a couple traps in your limp range, this could be an okay one.
Right. Okay.
No
we
dice.
will not get heads up. I know you're disappointed.
Oh. So the blinds have gone up, and things are a little shorter now. See, like, oh, actually, this is interesting. So I mean, we're gonna have to raise this, right?
I assume so. Yes.
Okay. All right. But talking about the button open while you go ahead and raise it.
Okay.
You know, going back to like the 9-3 of hearts hand, on this stack, I would be much less likely to raise it because you're gonna get jammed on way more often when the players have this like 13 blind amount,
Right.
rather than before when they have 25.
Right.
All right, so the turn is a 4. All right, so let's pause on the river. Let's talk about this hand a little bit.
Let's talk about it.
So on the turn, this is obviously a very bad turn for you. An 8 gets there, a 3 gets there, but that's extremely unlikely to, first off, call an open in the small blind,
Right.
and then second off, call a raise in the flop. Like, in order for him to have a 3, he kind of has to have a hand that's like 7-3 or 6-3, but those hands aren't really going to play pre-flop. So I would say he has a 3 close to never.
Okay.
The question really is, does he have an 8 or not? And I think this is an important thing to make sure that you're doing as well. I think that on the stack to pot ratio, the pot's obviously very big compared to the stacks. I think if you have an 8 on the turn, I think you should generally be checking in order to be able to call river bets.
Right. Okay.
I think that on the turn, you can still have some bluffs. You can still value bet a couple of 8s. And then I think if you have a hand like a set, I know it kind of sucks because the board's a straight, but I think if you do have a set, I would still generally advocate just jamming the turn.
Okay.
Because if you do have a set and the river is a 3 or an 8, you're playing the board. If he has a hand like a flush draw, he still has a bunch of equity. And you want to deny his opportunity to win the pot there. So
Okay.
I would probably change this strategy as I got a lot deeper, but unfortunately the way that these smaller stack to pot ratios work are that you have to just commit with a lot of hands that you might not otherwise want to.
Right. So since you have to get your money in the pot anyway, at some point, usually on the river, you may as well get full value from his draws on the turn.
Exactly. And I think that trapping gets a lot better too, because now he's way more likely to put in money on the river. So
Okay.
as played, I like checking this hand on the turn. It makes a lot of sense. Betting doesn't really do much, and I think facing the min bet in the river, you usually have a clear call.
Okay. All right.
Whoa. Okay.
Queen 7.
All right. So that happened.
It did.
I
Is your head exploding, Doug?
Head explode.
Just try not to. Come on, you know these micro stakes now. You know the kind of things that you see.
You see a lot of things. Definitely see a lot. Oh, and that was the bankroll challenge. Yeah.
But you can't wait to go back to that.
I've played many hands of actually, to be honest with you, these are lower stakes than I played in that. So
Oh my gosh, this is a whole new world, right?
it is.
But I've tuned into your stream so many times and just seen you go, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. How could you have that? You're like, I don't know if that was the best move, guys. Don't try this at home.
There is a lot of stuff that happens when you're playing for pennies.
Yes.
Which makes sense. I mean, people are having fun. It's fine. It is funny to me how many people are like, "Oh, you're playing micro stakes, so you shouldn't be playing like good poker." And I'm always just like, "Oh, what?"
I know, right?
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Like in micro stakes, you can still bluff, and you should be trying to work bluffs into a lot of your strategy. You just need to be a little more careful about things like rake, and make sure that you're picking hands out well, and
Okay.
just not be too, focused on like, oh, he's a station. I saw this one hand he called somebody. Like I think players get a little bit too hung up on stuff like that rather than trying to play their hands in the best way.
Right.
So pre-flop I think is fine facing a limp. Jamming also could be okay. I do like having a couple aces, and your weakest ones make the most sense as checks. So
Right.
I definitely like this.
Okay.
I think fold here, pre.
Would you?
I
I wasn't actually sure. You can see in the past Courtney pausing here and going, I am confused.
I mean, jamming is probably okay. You have an ace, and like, it's kind of like this. If he's opening the button in a way that's like normal or like too loose, you're gonna crush him with this play.
Right.
But if he's making an adjustment for the fact he has 13 blinds, this raise should actually be way more polarized, and I think you're gonna be crushed against a lot of hands. It's probably okay either way, honestly.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure kind of how the big blind stack affected it. I assume he is raising with a hand that can call the big blind. So I'm not sure if that should make it more or less likely for me to jam. Perhaps less likely.
If you think that he's not gonna, well, let me start off with this. He's definitely not folding to a big blind jam here, because it's a 5 blind jam. He has 2 in there, so
That is an assumption we could make. I have seen strange things happen, but yes.
all right, fair enough. Let's just say that like he's very unlikely to fold here.
All right. Yes.
And so that does make this open a bit stronger.
Yes.
But it also means he's more likely to have some hands like king queen, king 10, etc. So
Okay.
I think I would probably fold here. I will admittingly say that I'm not like the expert push fold guy.
Right.
But if he's opening somewhat correctly given the big blind stack, I just don't think that you're gonna be making money with this jam.
Okay. That makes sense. No. Plot twist. Big blind.
Oh man. Taught him a lesson though.
Oh, we got him.
And Brandy got caught with his hand in the cookie jar.
I know, right?
Get your dongers out. No. All right, so this appears to be one-on-one hold'em.
It is.
Nice.
The heads up. So, King 3, I was thinking that this must be kind of... I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but I assume that we should have, even though he's so short, perhaps a check back range with, say, a King 2 or one of our worst kings.
I like where you're going with this. I think it's great to have some kings in that range, so you have some playability across different boards. And at this stack size, I don't know if King 3. I mean, it depends on the way he's limping. I imagine Jam is probably fairly. I'm trying to think if Jam is winning or not here. I think it's probably close. Maybe even be slightly losing depending on the way the button's playing.
Yeah.
But the idea that you're going to have some kings and even maybe a couple aces in your range when you do check in the big blind, I think is very important, because it prevents it from when the board comes ace or king high, you're just screwed, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think I like check here.
Okay. I was thinking that too. I'm not sure what I did.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens.
Well, we went all in.
Okay. Easy enough.
Okay.
And I think we've pretty consistently seen from Brandy trying to play too loose on the button.
Right. Wow.
Wow, that was a counter.
10.
I just don't understand what people are thinking when they do this stuff.
Right.
know?
I'm not sure either. I guess he was just getting tired of my shit, so that was it. That was fighting back.
So would you say there's still money to be won in the 25-cent spin and go streets?
Yeah, I think maybe that 10-4 suited. I think that's made me optimistic about my bankroll challenge too.
How's that going overall, by the way?
I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it, but it's interesting. There's been the ups and downs, as I'm sure you've experienced during your bankroll challenge.
I have certainly experienced a lot of both of those things.
Yeah, so I think I'm learning mostly that it's a grind no matter what I do, unless I spin just something huge.
All right.
Well, thanks, Doug. I really appreciate the help. I am much smarter and going to be going into my next spin and go games with a much higher ROI now.
If you're interested in learning more about spin and goes, you can click the annotated box in order to go over to her channel and see part 1 of this series. We're also probably going to have a few different members of Grind Nation on here, so definitely stay tuned and subscribe to the channel if you're interested in meeting the team, as well as maybe learning some other poker hands type material like our series Poker Hands. So on that note, thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you soon.